Our official start. Welcome to Northwest Cider Symposium Day 2. Hopefully you got a chance to enjoy the keynote speakers presentation this morning with Tom Oliver, as well as also some amazing comments from Scott and from Emily and Chad. We have a great group today presenting topic that's really important, really on a lot of folks' mind. Using collective industry messaging to strengthen your brand's social media is the name of our session. We've got Madison, Shirley, Maura, Hardman, and Michelle Markesteyn, and they'll introduce themselves a little bit more as we get going. I'm going to hop off and let us dive right in.
And good morning, everyone. Hey, I am Michelle Markesteyn, and I am a consultant to the Northwest Cider Association. I have had the privilege of working with this group almost for 2 years now, primarily in consulting, grant writing, and you know, as we're all nimble, anything that needs to be happening. And so we designed this presentation, next slide, to accomplish the objectives of, you able to change it, Maura?
Trying. Oh. There you
go. We have some objectives for you today. Is really define and what is collective content marketing to help you understand what that is. And I'll take a step back and just kind of locate that conversation of collective marketing for the industry and where it came from and where the Northwest Cider Association is headed into the future. And then Maura and Madison are really going to bring to life how these industry identified content wells of people, passion, place, and products can be used to strengthen your brand while creating unity across the industry. So first, what do we mean by collective content marketing, and where did this idea come from? You know, if you actually Google it, there's collective marketing, which usually is when groups of people get together and market their products. And in some ways, we're starting to do that with Cider Club. But really what we mean by collective content marketing is many cideries working together to educate consumers and the trade with the same top line messages. So we all amplify our smaller voices to be a larger, louder voice. The idea of category marketing and promotion obviously is not new concept. Tons of commodity commissions, wine boards do it, but it is for the Pacific Northwest cider industry. You know, we're only a decade old. There isn't a precedence to go on. And, you know, just thinking back, association started in 2010, right? Just 10 years ago with less than 10 members and has now swelled to over 200 cideries in the Pacific Northwest. So next slide. So the association, along with cider makers, advisory board engagement, really championed the first steps towards activating a collective content marketing strategy. The association's been systematically, like right down the line, disseminating marketing information to really, you know, anticipate and meet evolving consumer needs. You know, we are doing ongoing market research. We're tracking sales and micro influences on the industry. We are working hard to gather market research and better understand how consumer attitudes are towards hard cider. As you know, it's quickly evolving. We have conducted a competitive analysis, both within the industry and then across other craft alcoholic beverage categories, and have been working hard to develop a compelling shared story for craft cider. So all to say that it has taken over 6 years and hundreds of conversations, iterative, every time we learn something, sharing with the industry, getting feedback from folks through town halls, panels, and a very engaged board, and you know, additional consumer insights to get to the place of being able to have these content wells of people, beep, passion, place, and products. That's my next slide cue. Thank you. So they're so repetitive. At some point, it's like, oh my gosh. But really, and you heard Tom even talk about it today, it's the people, it's their passion for pressing. It's the innovation of using the materials from the Pacific Northwest, the incredible access to water and apples and other ingredients, and just having a really strong industry in all the different materials and supplies and distribution channels you need that are creating incredible products. Next slide. So we got that far, and then we're like, now what? Right? We have these content wells, and on the one side, right, you have your cider, and your goals, to overly simplify, are increase consumers' awareness, their preferences for your cider, and their purchase of your cider, of your products. And recall, the Cider Association is really focused on 3 mission drivens of sales, quality, and the cider community. And really at its core, what the association about is industry traction, right? Like getting past that hockey stick growth where the industry is sustainable, where it's valid business models, and we can expect stronger, more solid market standing. So we've done a number of different awareness campaigns. Everything we do is pretty much grant funded in that space. So, you know, getting $20,000 to $50,000 in an awareness campaign is so paltry for what we need to do to move the needle. And then COVID hit. Many of you recall we did lots of interviews, we conducted town halls, sessions, we launched new programming for virtually sharing stories. And then, this is pretty awesome, next slide. In September, we partnered with the Oregon Department of Agriculture. And basically, that was to explore what came very front and center for all of us during COVID, is so many market channels were drying up, but what exploded was the direct to consumer. So we quickly analyzed a number of different direct to consumer markets, such as Food Hub, Disruptive Delivery, and cider clubs. I know there's one more. Oh, online, another online, but then the cider club concept came up, which you have been hearing about in different ways. But the bottom line is, and we can go to the next slide, is, you know, we see cider club can seem like a simple concept, but the reality is, if it is done intentionally, it is an elegant solution to gaining industry traction, to immediate online direct-to-consumer sales for cideries, and then really a learning lab to give cideries direct marketing tools, strategies, and content. Next. And here's what I mean by that. Seeing what slide I'm on. That, you know, we use a cider club to tell the story of Northwest Cider, but also to develop marketing assets that are available to you: photography, product, lifestyle, educational videos. We've been working with artists to play with the idea of original artwork. Next. We also, as a real-time marketing lab, are able to quickly do A/B testing. You heard Jay and Cassandra present on some of that yesterday. Those marketing insights we keep getting, and the dream is that we can make the mistakes so you can make different ones. We can help you with those marketing and consumer insights more quickly. And next, with the goal of, we're working towards sustainability in the project, but you know, and are penciling out around 2,000 cider would help us make this model sustainable over a longer period of time. And we saw suddenly, like, oh my gosh, now all of a sudden we have these cases of cider going of 2,000 people. Right now we're over 500 within the first 4 months of launching the Cider Club. So, you know, it is a captive audience. They are interested, they are curious, and we are determined to arm them with education in a really fun way to move them from curious to lover to raging cider fans, and have over thousands of cider ambassadors around the country. And lastly is the shared content calendar. We are working with Oliver Russell and our amazing board to develop, you can beep, create a content calendar. And this is a platform, and you can go to the next slide too, that we're kind of going to use for the rest of today's presentation. That here we are making a content, but a calendar thematically, but just like your cider, you can make it your own. And I'll turn it over to you, Madison.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle. For everyone that doesn't know me, I am Madison Shirley. I'm the content marketing manager for Two Towns Ciderhouse, but I'm also a very proud board member of the Northwest Cider Association. I've been working with Michelle, with Jana, with Cassandra, Emily to kind of help direct some of the marketing directions for the association this year and help put together this content calendar we're about to talk about, as well as really develop out this conversation of what collective marketing and conversations are for our industry and what that can look like for our region in particular, but then also how individual cideries can define themselves and really stand out while still utilizing this collective marketing messaging that really raises the rest of the industry with it. Before I get too much farther, I do want to preface that I like to say this before all of my talks. I have some pretty bad anxiety, so I would like to just let everyone know that in case there's any awkward pauses or little extra thoughts going on. That's just what's happening. If we can go to the next slide. Awesome. So this is kind of a super quick peek at what the content calendar that we've been working together on and putting together. So as a content creator myself, the biggest hurdle that I have always run into, and I know repeatedly that I hear from people across the spectrum, not just within cider, but every industry, is what content are we making? What story are we telling? What's the narrative? How am I going to tell it and how am I going to capture it? And especially like even just breaking it down into basic themes can be so difficult and complicated and time consuming that, especially if it's not your passion and it's not your thing, that it really takes away from your love of whatever it is you're doing or your love of the product or whatever action that you're trying to tell and narrative you're trying to tell. So what we really wanted to do was simplify that down, particularly for smaller cideries or cideries that are still having a hard time grasping what narrative they're trying to tell across the board, and bring it home so that there are just a few key themes to work off of, and that each season has a little bit of a different direction. Like Michelle had mentioned, those key themes that we're really focusing on are people, place, passion, and product. For every month, we've put together these content calendars. We've got one for every month. They are free resources to the Northwest Cider Association members. So if you are a member, you can find these in the resources files at the Northwest Cider Association website. If you are not a member, I encourage becoming one, but we will still have some handouts at the end that will be available for everyone that's attending this. They won't have these full content calendars, but they will have a lot of really great resources for how to kind of brainstorm and break things down. But each page is going to have a little blurb like this. It's of course going to tell you the month. It's going to have some good dates to keep in mind. Not always necessary to do holidays on your social account because sometimes it can get watered down. But if there are a few key ones that you really want to shout out, they're good just to kind of placehold there. It's going to have a little descriptor of what we think in the association is kind of the summary of that month and some important details you might need to keep in consideration, whether it's celebrating Black History Month in February, looking at kind of greater diversity, talking about pre-spring, like how are you prepping for the upcoming new seasons or shifts or the end of winter. So there's going to be a really nice, beautiful blurb about that just kind of helps stimulate some thoughts and directions there. And then you're going to have core themes, and with those core themes, very descriptive breakdowns of suggested topics to go with. So for this one in particular, it's of course the people is showcasing those diverse partners that you've got within your supply chain specifically. So not just even within your own cidery, but who are your partners that you work with, things along those lines. who are the berry farmers that you're working with, who are your close account connections that you really want to highlight and showcase. Similarly, for place, in this example, it's showing what your facility looks like, whether it's your canning and bottling facility, maybe it's your tap room, maybe it's the orchard if you don't have a facility and it's just that space. And then within passion, who are those unique people in your life that have helped kind of define what your passion is and help build it from there. And then we'll also kind of give very quick examples of what that might look like in a story format, because I know that stories in particular can be a little bit daunting to some folks. It's hard to visualize how you're going to break things down so it can be digestible in quick 15-second snippets. And then we'll have some quick little social media tips of the month. Very solidly reviewed. Lots of folks have looked over them and have put together some great expert advice on them. But so those are what the different content calendars are going to look like. And Maura, if you want to skip forward to April, we've got April on here, the next two over. So those are, of course, the content calendars, but these are just the tools. And this is kind of the how that we're proposing that you can utilize them. But the why really kind of continues to be built out. There is true strength in having a consistent narrative across the industry. You see it in lots of different places and lots of different industries, even in the alcohol industry as well. Wine, even though there are thousands and thousands of different wineries, they're all going to have some very similar narratives that are talking about their vineyards, talking about the quality. There's lots of similarities in how profiles are broken down, which, as we know in cider, we're still kind of trying to figure out how to explain that to customers in some respects. What is dry? What is sweet? Things like that. That will just evolve with the age of the industry. But beyond that, when you're able to introduce to your customers on an industry level a consistent story that they can come to expect, but then on a cidery level, you can change and make it unique and of yourself. It gives the whole industry a chance to elevate itself, but then also as a cidery, you then can define yourself among others. So I know that sounds very contradicting in a lot of different ways, but as a customer-facing and think about yourself as a customer, you want to you become familiar with products, you become familiar with stories, and you kind of want to see some continued expectations of those lines. And as cideries, we can follow those very similar trends and very similar stories that continue to raise your quality of product, whether that's talking about the people that you work with, talking about the orchards that you're sourcing fruit from, things along those lines. But then when you can get into the specifics of your individual story, so your individual tap room, your individual farmers that you work with, your individual products, that's how you then begin to kind of like pop out and redefine it. So here are some of the examples of really how we're talking about doing that and how people are individually working through this. So for an example, we've got people here. The prompt for this one was showcasing the women in cider that are on your team, either those working behind the scenes or on the front lines in your supply chain, etc. I pulled a couple of really great examples from Western Cider and Merryweather Cider. They did them in two very different ways, and it really signifies their unique brands in so many ways. Western Cider, they're just always having a good time, it feels like, but in a very rural and rustic manner. They're very connected with their product. And of course, Kira is just a cool person overall, and you can really kind of articulate that and see it very quickly through the imagery. But they keep it very quick, short and sweet, talking about what she's doing and what she's tasting. And then Merryweather Cider, who are fabulous folks as well. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I think Luisa is who they're talking about, but the narrative that they break down for her is much more like interview style and really tells the story very uniquely. So still does still addresses the prompt directly, but in two very dynamically different ways, and defines the brands and allows them an opportunity to kind of flourish and continue building that narrative, but still in the same direction. So Maura, if you want to go next. Awesome. Um, and then, so another continues some additional examples for passion. These two, I absolutely love the difference between these two cideries and how they unintentionally followed this prompt. The passion topic for this was bud break and the beauty of it. And Nomad Cider, who I believe is up in BC, they showed the shot of rolling hills behind their orchard and just very quintessential, gorgeous Canadian scene. You can't see the buds that are on it, but they are talking about how in the content they talk about how their Porter's Perfection is budding and how it's getting ready and beginning to bloom. Whereas in contrast, Dragonhead cider is just right up there in the bloom. You see it, they still give a little more detail with it, talking about how it's Redfield trees. But while they are two different, completely different styles, they still tell that same story and same narrative, but allow you a different peek into what they as a cidery might value or see as that moment of the story that they want to tell. And then if you'll go to the next slide. Awesome. And then these two, I had to fit a Two Towns one in there. I know, apologies. But for place, I think that this one shows a little bit of, both of these show that you don't have to be married exactly to what the prompts that we're supplying are either. Because for this instance, of course, the prompt was sharing an inside look at your canning and bottling facility. Well, for Finn River, this wasn't their, I mean, it might be their bottling or canning facility, but in reality, it's where they were packing their cider club boxes, which is in itself a different form of packaging, but also is an action and a place that gives people a sneak peek and an exciting kind of like, oh, yes, our club box is coming, it's getting packed, it's getting ready, gives a different level of energy to it than just seeing a traditional canning line or a traditional bottling line. I don't believe Finn River cans anything at all. But that is still just as much of an important portion of their story as everything else, because they're reaching out to their community, they're connecting with it, and that their club is a huge aspect of their cidery. And then on the Two Towns side, this is clearly in our cellar instead, but this is also something that's really important to Two Towns as a whole, is the kind of specialty barrel aged lines that they can run, and just seeing kind of the walls of barrels behind it and juice being filled into the kegs. It's a cool narrative visually. It doesn't, again, fit directly into the facility question or prompt that we had provided, but that's what I loved about and wanted to be able to show an example of, is that we're giving you these prompts, but they get to be manipulated however you want to, because it's your story, it's your cidery, it's your orchard. You get to do what you want with it. We're just kind of giving you some ideas and tools to kind of walk you through it. But yeah, and that's kind of a very quick high level view. And Maura, I'd love if you're able to kind of take from there.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Madison. And thanks for that excellent intro also, Michelle. The Northwest Cider Association has done an incredible amount of work putting this together for everyone as a resource. And I'm going to do a little bit of a deeper dive that hopefully will sort of demystify a couple of things, and also make you, if you're not necessarily considering yourself a marketer per se, we want to remove some of the barriers so that we're all having similar conversations, amplifying the messaging of the cider industry as a whole. And ultimately, we all win when more people are talking about cider, more people are drinking cider, more people are sharing their stories and having those conversations. I did want to take a quick note here to talk about sort of free and easy tools. I won't spend a ton of time on this, but basically, if you're if you're in charge of the social media and are posting content for your cidery and you have a really small team, if you have a smartphone, you basically have everything that you need to make those content pieces. I spend most of my time, we do have actually really nice cameras available at Seattle Cider. By the way, I'm Maura, I'm the marketing and PR manager for Seattle Cider. And I spend most of my time actually snapping pictures in the moment of things that are happening at the cidery when I happen to be there. Those are the things that interest me. I find that I get really stoked to see the behind the scenes things. So with this, it's not a huge barrier to entry to be able to participate in these content wells. You have all of the information in front of you. You have the things, you are the subject matter expert. And so if you're still feeling a little bit hesitant about considering yourself a marketer, we're going to talk a little bit more about storytelling in a second. The easiest way, I think, for some folks, lowest barrier to entry is just posting directly to the apps from your phone. You've got your picture, you can post it directly to the app. You've probably done this on your own social channels. But then there are other options that you have if you want to look at scheduling things ahead of time. Maybe you're going to be really, really busy coming up. You have a week where it's all hands on deck. There's production things happening. Maybe you might have a minute to like bust out your phone and snap some pictures for content later on down the road. But there's a ton of places where you can pre-schedule, which is really nice. So there's things like later.com, Planoly, Sprout Social. There's also, it's within the Facebook business suite. So it speaks really nicely to both Facebook and Instagram, since the Instagram was purchased by Facebook, that you can use Creative Studio, and that will also help you schedule ahead of time. This is another place where figure out what works for your team. Maybe you have a couple of people who are scheduling pieces to your social content, and you're sharing that that aspect of the work that you're doing to get in front of your customers, in front of potential accounts. So you just really want to figure out what works for you. But all of these have free options, which I think is really important. You don't have to spend a ton of money to show up really nicely with your content. Let's see. Oh, also, I included some really great other examples just to do a deeper dive. What I ended up doing to prepare for this presentation, beyond obviously talking to Madison and Michelle, were fantastic experts and a really great resource in and of itself. I took the Northwest Cider Association pamphlet that has the list of all the cideries that are involved there, and I went and looked at all of their social. It was a really fun exercise for me. I encourage you all to do the same. I think in addition to the content wells and to the month-by-month inspiration guides that are provided, looking and seeing what other people are doing is a great way to think about like, oh, I could do that too. Oh, we do this as well. That actually is a really good story to share. That peek behind the curtain that people are giving on their social channels that customers and accounts really love to see. It's humanizing, it's personalizing, and it continues to get folks out in front. It continues to further the conversation about the cider industry on social channels. So it's a really great thing to do. If you're ever feeling uninspired, go look and see what other people are doing, and not even just in the cider industry. So coming back to that and looking at the aspect of maybe not feeling like, okay, if you work for a really small cidery, and you're making cider by day, or you're receiving pallets of product to come in, boxes, cans, you're wearing 18 different hats all the time, it might be a really difficult thing for you to make the leap to think of yourself as a marketer. But what I challenge you all to do is to start thinking about yourself as a storyteller. Essentially, marketing is storytelling. To date, the very best kind of marketing that you can do is going to be one-to-one, face-to-face, like person-to-person. And that's our opportunity that we have with social media. These marketing channels were called social media for a reason. Out the gate, they were intended for folks to use to connect to each other as humans. And now it's actually a really wonderful resource because as brands, we get to connect to potential customers and accounts and share our stories. So when you're thinking about this, I really encourage folks to think about it as a conversation. If you have someone coming into your tasting room, or you in different times had an opportunity to meet someone at a festival and they're asking about your cidery, what are the things that you tell them? That's content right there. It's a low barrier to entry. It's what are the things that you're passionate about? Talk about what you know about. Share your expertise, share your excitement, brag about things. I really, really loved this post from Greenwood Cider. If you can see it, it might be a little bit small on there. You'll have to like zoom in, but you can actually see the genuine excitement about the awards that they won. Things are rough right now, and people want to share in your wins. And honestly, like, if you're entering cider award competitions, you better share if you win. And so that's exciting pieces to tell. I think in the day-to-day, when we get really busy in our companies, making cider, packaging cider, trying to figure out ways to sell more cider, sometimes it's hard to think about telling those stories again. Think back to a time when you had someone, you know, from out of town come and visit you, and they came to see your cidery for the first time, and maybe you took them on a tour. I actually really love doing this, and I miss this a lot. But you take them on a tour, they get to actually see, you know, the inner workings, where the magic happens moments, and they geek out with you. And it's really exciting to share those stories. We can't individually be in every bottle shop that, you know, sells our product. We can't hang out in the grocery aisles for too long telling people about how awesome our cider is. So instead, this is an opportunity to storytell direct to consumer so that they learn about cider as an industry, and hopefully about your cider individually, with that goal of increasing brand awareness, industry awareness, and hopefully increasing your sales as well. So look at it as definitely as an opportunity, as a get to, as opposed to a have to, because we're all storytellers at the end of the day. Think about the conversations that either you've done in networking during the Northwest Cider Symposium, or that you've done in the past when we've had an opportunity to, you know, meet after a festival and have drinks together and talk about the things that you're excited about. Your customers, your potential customers, they all want to hear that stuff too. They want to share in your joy, your excitement. And as an industry, it is really cool what we do. It's certainly hard work, and we do it because we love it, but share those stories. A couple of pro tips to as we're moving on here. Again, figure out what works for you and your team. Your system might be a little bit of organized chaos. It might change. My team changed recently. We did a little bit of a reorganization because we had some folks who decided to join other industries, and I miss them and I wish them well, and you figure it out. And so our system might change, and that's okay. There's resources for everyone to be able to handle those things. Something that's really important, link to things, tag to things. If part of your goals with your social media, with your marketing, is to increase sales, and you have e-commerce, I better be able to go to your site and find a link that will send me directly to where I can purchase that, or at least more information how to get there. Lower that barrier to entry for folks. So as you're storytelling and somebody is completely enwrapped in this story of your brand new single varietal that's coming out, tell them that there's a link in the bio on your Instagram and send them directly to where they can buy it, or at least get more information to where they can. This is also something that's really important too, as far as like tagging people. I shared some stories last night after the Northwest Cider virtual tasting. And of course, I tagged Northwest Cider Association and used their hashtag for Northwest Cider Club. I wanted to amplify their messaging, and they in turn took that and reshared. What's awesome about that, it's sort of like an agreement, like, thanks guys, I love what you're doing, so I'm going to make some messaging about it and send it out to my people. And they appreciated that, so they shared that, and together we're amplifying that messaging. So it's a really nice symbiotic relationship, and I love it when customers tag us in posts. A, because I have that moment of seeing how customers see our cidery through their eyes, but B, because they just did part of my job for me, and I'm like, yay, thank you. I have new content that I can share either in my stories or reshare, you know, in my feed. Sometimes I ask if I can, save it and share it later for something else that I might have in mind. Either way, make sure that you're interacting with folks and sharing that user-generated content. It builds brand loyalty. It makes people really excited because you've acknowledged that they did something really cool for you, and they're telling you that they like your cider. So that is worth sharing. Tell the world, this person likes my cider, a real human. It's not just me who makes the cider, or it's not, it's not just the company. We aren't the only ones who like our cider. So share that messaging. And then this, lastly, is a really important one, and I'm going to tell you guys a really funny story about this. If you haven't had the opportunity to watch the branding session that was yesterday, take some time to watch that when we get the links for all of the playback. This is really important, and I loved that this messaging was shared as well. This idea of done is better than perfect. You won't get it right all the time. You might get really excited about a post that you share about something that you're really excited about, and it gets a couple of likes. And then you post something that you're like, well, I have to post something today and I don't have time to really think about diving deep into storytelling and really getting people excited about this thing that I'm doing, but I'm going to post something so that I'm continuing with the messaging, and everybody likes that post. And you're like, well, how did that happen? Social media and marketing, it's ever changing. The algorithms are changing, just the optics, the trends, the world's changing all the time. So just get out there and do it. Doing it, done is better than perfect. This is not cider making, right? Where you're ever perfecting your craft within this, but it is storytelling, and it will help you to be able to continue to perfect your craft on the cider making side. My funny story about this is yesterday, I thought that I was going to be able to share this picture during the Northwest Cider tasting, and I realized too late that I actually couldn't share it in the chat. And then I promised I would share it on the stories. Well, it was late in the evening, it had been a long day, and then I posted it and realized this morning that I had grammatical errors, which is it's a nightmare for me, and I'm super embarrassed. You guys are welcome to go and look at it now. I will not be sharing that in highlights and saving it forever, but the internet's forever. So if you decide to screenshot that, and I don't care, but I did do it, and I was glad that I did. And it wasn't a perfect post, but it had a really great reaction. And I had, people applauding and all of those things. So kind of a silly thing to do, but done is better than perfect. Get your messaging out there. Make sure that you're sharing, storytell with us, talk about people, talk about place, talk about passion. Let's increase the reach of the cider industry together. And yeah, let's see. Oh, lastly, this is really important. We are going to, Madison mentioned this earlier, we are going to share some resources with you guys. There's a fantastic handout that Michelle and Madison spend a ton of time putting together that has tips and tricks, all sorts of really great information, and one of which is this sort of content calendar and how you can pop things in and say, okay, I'm going to rotate. This is going to be a people post. This is going to be a place post. Take these things and make them your own. But I just went ahead and actually these are all photos from my phone, me just being in the cidery, and occasionally I stop people and make them pose for actually nice photos, which is wonderful. But then I also like action photos, the behind the scenes. And so I just put together some content like I would use personally to show you kind of how I would use some of those resources. So you guys will have access to that soon. I'm going to wrap up here because I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to answer some questions. But thanks so much for this, and reach out if you have questions beyond this. But we can either take them in the chat, or if you feel more comfortable hopping on with us and coming online, feel free to do that as well.
Yeah, come on and chat. Thank you so much, Maura, and thank you, Michelle, and thank you everyone in the association. Jana, y'all are fantastic. But seriously, if you have any questions, we know social is daunting on so many facets, but it doesn't have to be. We can make it fun, it's possible, and not everyone and not every cidery has the ability to have a PR manager or content manager, but there's ways to kind of work it so that you're still having a good time telling your own story, and still telling the collective story of cider in general, so that there's greater awareness between your customers on what your product's about, as well as what the industry is all about, and what cider and how amazing cider in general is. Let's see.
It looks like we have a question. So Barry asked, can we speak about branded content and what bloggers should be doing related to product being shared with them and posted?
What blogger should be doing? Do you mean? I'm trying to work through that question. Apologies. About branded question.
You mean in terms of transparency? I think that like if you're doing something with someone that's like a pay to play, using Instagram, yeah, I mean, I think that you can say, you can certainly say, I think it's important to be transparent with what you're doing. You can say, I was given the opportunity to try this cider, and here's what I think. And I think that obviously as a blogger, we would hope that those folks would give their true reactions to something. We want people to share their feelings about things, obviously in a nice way, but I do think it's really important. Transparency is important. Knowing like where a product came from, obviously tag each other, share hashtags. You can have like a little like one sheet that says, these are our expectations when we work with someone, and kind of a copy and paste and send it when you send someone product. Send your media kit if you have one. Make a media kit if you don't. That might just be a couple of things that like the description that you have. Oh, yay, thanks, Madison. There's the handout that we were talking about. But yeah, transparency, share with people, definitely tag, reshare. If I'm working with a blogger or an influencer and they shared content and then I end up resharing it later, I continue to tag that person and make sure that like, folks know who took the photo, who we worked with to make that happen. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
And I would kind of build on that as well. One blogger that does a really good job, I think, of being transparent is Along Come Cider. That Meredith is always very transparent about when a cidery's delivered something to them and when it's a kind of a partnership agreement. And also when you are doing posts on Instagram, or on Facebook as well. Make sure that if it is a partnership, or especially if it's paid for in whatever way, which does include receiving product, that you put that it's an ad, or that clarification is there, because Instagram will flag you eventually if you get caught with that. They get really stickler with it. They want to make sure that there's clear communication to the customers that you two have been interacting, you and the business.
Paula is asking how often you should be posting. I think that's going to depend on like how full your plate is, right? I think that more is better, but only to a point. I'll stop watching stories if it looks like a tiny dotted line. Like that's too many for me. I want to like keep consuming. I don't know. If you can only do 2 to 3 times a week, do that. If you can do more, do more. The idea is that you're amplifying your own messaging and you're amplifying the messaging of the industry by the mere fact that you're doing it. Also, the more that you do it, the better you get at it and the faster you get at it. So you'll be able to eventually increase that. But do what you can do until you can do a little bit more, and make it work for you with the time that you have. I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah, and building on that, like Maura said, quality over quantity for sure. For Two Towns and within our sister brands, we tend to have a policy of a main page post, so like in the feed, trying to have at least one a week, but then posting to our stories really regularly. So that's where the user-generated content comes from. When someone tags you in something, feel free to post it up. Even if it's in someone else's feed, you can share to your story if you're tagged in it. But making sure that the quality of what you're posting is there, because then it's going to be more impactful for sure. Let's see. There's one question I saw from Ginger about kind of being a new cidery and beginning to develop that story and what your narrative is. And we currently don't have any handouts or lessons for cideries starting up. That's a great idea, actually. So Michelle, you and I should connect on that, potentially building some resources. The handout that we put together does have some really great storyboarding kind of directives. And so that helps you begin breaking down the funnel of what your story of your cidery is. You can kind of walk from the very much more generic top level portion of like, this is like our high level concept, funneling it all the way down to those little more granular details. What I would say for starting it is really just throwing stuff like almost as if it's spaghetti at the wall. Like get a piece of paper out, start writing down what notes are of your story, and then begin picking and choosing from which ones you think are the most relevant to the one to your customer, but also to your greater narrative. And if you ever need additional advice or anything like that, I am always glad if anyone needs additional advice on social or just has questions on how to tell narratives, feel free to reach out to me. I'll drop my email in the link as well.
Awesome. I think that's about it for time for us. And yeah, to Jana's point there, definitely check out the marketing session from yesterday. They have some great tips and tricks about branding, really useful information there. But thanks so much for having us.